Hey y'all! Okay, so I'm still not there. I am going to come back at some point, but not today. Just a reminder, we are going to still do the bonus with the food drive, the canned food drive. So if you are wanting to donate your cans, just make sure you grab them sometime this week and you can turn those in. Next week, I will be back on December the 7th. So, be prepared for that. Yesterday's lesson, we were working on the factoring with the imaginary numbers. So the first thing we're going to do is go over your homework. So get out your homework so we can check that. And then we are going to be working in your workbook today on lesson 9-1. So get out your workbook and get out your homework so we can start with that. Okay. So I threw away my paper, so I'm going to do this on scratch paper. This is my teacher book. So I believe I had you do number 9. Number 9 is 3x squared plus 12. I know, I remember now, the first thing that I told you to do is to factor out that 3, which leaves you with x squared plus 4. That is your sum of squares right there. So I'm going to take the square root of x squared and the square root of 4, which is going to give me x and 2. I'm going to have x plus 2i and x minus 2i, and I'm going to bring down that 3, and that is my answer. Don't forget your i's, okay? All right, and then we had to do number 10, which is 5x squared plus 80y squared. So 5 and 80 have 5 in common. So I'm going to factor that out. That gives me x squared. And then what's 80 divided by 5? I don't know that off the top of my head. 80 divided by 5 is 16. I was going to guess 16, but I didn't want to be wrong. Alright, so then we have that factored out, which is basically undistributing. And so then I'm going to take the square root of each of those. Okay, the square root of x squared is x. The square root of 16y squared is 4y. So I'm going to have x plus 4yi. Make sure you put your I. And then x minus 4yi. And then I need to bring down the 5. That's my answer. Okay. Then I told you guys to do what numbers? I think 13 and 14. Okay. So 13 was 2x squared plus 50 equals 0. So you could have done this 2 ways. The first thing that I'm going to do is, I guess I'll do the factoring, kind of like what we did above. So I'm going to take that 2 out. That's going to give me x squared plus 25 equals 0. So then the square root of x squared is x. The square root of 25 is 5. I'm going to have x plus 5i, x minus 5i equals 0. I do have that 2 in front, but that 2 is actually not going to do anything. And what we could have done from the beginning is just divide it out, because if I divide this side by 2 and this side by 2, that's going to cancel. But 0 divided by 2 is still 0. So it's really not going to do anything. So we just drop it off. Adios. And then you take each of those parentheses and set each one of those equal to 0 by itself. So I'm going to subtract 5i. So x equals negative 5i. That's one of the solutions. Then I'm going to add 5i. So x equals positive 5i, and that's my other solution. So those are the 2 solutions to number 13. And then number 14 was already halfway solved for us, so I'm just going to embrace that and divide by 3. So that's going to give me x squared equals, I think that's even. Let me do the math real quick. 54 divided by 3. Yeah, so that's going to be negative 18. So then I need to take the square root of negative 18. 18 is not perfect, but the factors 9 and 2 give you 18, and 9 is perfect. We also have that negative 1. So negative 1 times 9 times 2 gives you the negative 18. The square root of negative 1 is I. The square root of 9 is 3. The square root of 2 is not perfect, so it stays in the radical. Get my face out of the way. So x equals plus or minus, so you have the positive and you have the negative, 3i square roots of 2. Okay? So that was your homework. Okay? We're not quizzing over this at this point. At some point we will have a test over this, but I'll be back and we'll review some more before that, but that's that. Alright, so today we are going to start lesson number 9, which is on page 137. So go to your textbook to page 137, and that's where we're going to be today. We're actually going to split this lesson into 2 days. So we're only going to get through about half of this lesson today, and then when you're back in class on Wednesday, we'll get to the rest of this lesson, which is what I would have done if I was in class 2, just because this lesson's kind of a big one, and I didn't want to overwhelm us. So, what is this lesson all about? So if we look at our learning targets, it says solve quadratic equations by taking the square roots, which is kind of what I just showed you. So we're going to kind of be going off that. And then the second part is to solve quadratic equations in standard form by completing the square. So this will be something that's totally new, but I can teach you everything that you need to know about that. Okay, so this goes just like with what I was telling you previously. If you are missing the bx, okay, and all you have is ax squared plus c equals 0, then all you have to do is isolate that x squared, take the square root of both sides, and boom, you've got your answer. You've got to put the plus or minus. So I've kind of already prefaced this with you with the imaginaries. So if we look at this first question here, we've got 5x squared minus 23 equals 0. So we need to solve for x. So they're going to add the 23. That gives you that. Divide by 5. Now that's not divisible, so leave it as a fraction. Don't give me decimals. Do not give me decimals. Okay. Then to get rid of the square, you have to take the square root of both sides. You can see they took the square root of the top and the square root of the bottom. Now, here's the pain. You cannot leave a square root in the bottom. Okay, so since 5 is not a perfect square, we can't just leave it like that. We have to rationalize the denominator. So this may be something that's new to you. I'm not sure if we've talked about it. Maybe we have. But when you rationalize the denominator, you multiply by itself, because 5 times 5 is 25. Well, what's the square root of 25? It's 5, not in the radical. That's your goal, to get rid of that. That will always happen. If you multiply by itself, then you're going to get the number without the radical. But whatever you multiply the bottom by, you also have to multiply the top by. So 23 times 5 gives you 115. It stays in the radical, and bingo, you've got your answer. Don't forget your plus or minus. Okay? Cool. So let's do some problems. If we look at A, right there, you've got 9x squared minus 49 equals 0. With this, it doesn't matter if you have like terms or not. It's not going to matter. You're simply just isolating x. So I'm going to add 49. 9x squared equals 49. I'm going to divide by 9. 9x squared equals 49 divided by 9. I'm leaving it like that. Don't give me the decimal. To get rid of the square, I'm going to take the square root of both sides. Square root of 49, square root of 9. I'm doing them individually because they may be perfect squares like this one. The square root of 49 is 7. The square root of 9 is 3. So my answer is x equals, don't forget the plus or minus, 7/3. just like that. So that's it. Basically, I've already taught this to you last lesson, a little bit early. So hopefully you're feeling good about it. All right, here we go. First step is add 7. 25x squared equals 7. Divide by 25 on both sides. X squared equals 7 divided by 25. Okay, then I'm going to take the square root of both the numerator and the denominator. Now, 7 is not a perfect square. Can't be reduced. It's a prime number, so it stays in the house. 25 is perfect. The square root of 25 is 5. So my answer is going to be x equals the square root of 7 over 5. Now, this is wrong. The reason that that is wrong is because I forgot to put plus or minus. Don't make that mistake. Make sure you put your plus or minus. And then you have both. The reason it would have been wrong is because you would have only given me the positive solution, and this is not just the positive solution. It's positive and negative. So remember what we're doing, you guys, is we're finding out where this parabola is crossing the x-axis. This is crossing at 2 places, the positive side and the negative side, and we could make this a decimal. I don't know what that is, obviously, on the top of my head. Let me see if I can do that, though. We have 7, take the square root of that, divide by 5. So our answers are approximately at positive 0.5 and negative 0.5. So that's approximately where those two solutions are. So your parabola would be crossing, if this is negative 1 and this is positive 1, your parabola would be crossing something like that. Okay, so don't forget that that's what we're doing. This whole time what we've been doing is we're looking for our solutions. The reason I can plot this on the x-axis is because these are not imaginary. Okay, with the last lesson they were imaginary. That means it doesn't physically touch the x-axis, but there's no I here. 7 is positive. The only reason we get an imaginary is if there's a negative under the radical and there's not. So this is a real solution. It's actually 2 real solutions. Okay, let's keep working. Remember that you are more than welcome to press pause, work this problem out by yourself, come back and check and see if you did it right. If I was the student, that's exactly what I would do. I would press pause right now, would try C, then once I have mine solved, press play, make sure I did it correctly. Okay, so you're not a robot. You don't have to just sit there and do everything that I do. Pause me, work it out, make sure you're doing it right. Add 16 to both sides. Divide by 5. X squared equals 16 divided by 5. I need to take the square root of both the numerator and the denominator. Alright, 16 is a perfect square, so that's going to be 4 over the square root of 5 is not, so it stays in the radical. But you cannot leave a radical in the denominator. So remember, just like the example, we're going to multiply by the square root of 5 on top and bottom. Same thing. You got to do the same thing on the bottom as you do on the top. Don't change it up. Leave it the same. So on the bottom, that's just going to be 5. Don't overthink about it. Whatever number's in the house comes out of the house. That's it. Up top, this is outside of the house. This is inside of the house. So they cannot be multiplied together. It's like terms. They're not like. They're not the same family. So I just smush them together. 4 square roots of 5. That is my answer, but don't forget to put plus or minus. Okay. One more example. D. I'm going to fold this page down and do it up here so I have enough space. Same thing. Pause me. Work D out. Come back and check. Alright, so I'm going to subtract 15. 4x squared equals negative 15. I'm going to divide by 4. x squared equals negative 15 over 4. I'm going to take the square root of both negative 15 and the square root of 4. Okay? 4 is perfect, so that's going to be 2. 15 is not. Okay, the factors of 15 are 1, 3, 5, and 15. None of those are perfect. But it has a negative under the radical. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put I'm going to take out the negative and then leave 15 in the house, just like that. And I need to put plus or minus. So plus or minus I square roots of 15 over 2. Okay? Cool. So that's the first part. I know that they're difficult, especially when you've got negatives and you've got crazy radicals, but that's how that works. Okay? All right, so now we're going to look at a problem like this. So if you're looking at, this is page 138, it says to solve this equation here, you can use a similar process. So what we're going to do is we're still going to try to isolate x. Okay, so you've only got that one variable. Since all we have is that one variable, we basically just need to get everything to the other side, but you have to do it in the correct order. Okay, so you can't start with the parentheses. You've got to save that for last. We have to focus on everything that's outside of the parentheses. You either have that multiply by 2 or subtract 3. And remember, you're doing PEMDAS, P-E-M-D-A-S, backwards. Okay, so we're starting down at the bottom and going up. So the first thing that we're looking for is, can we undo addition or subtraction? That's the minus 5. So you get rid of the 5 by adding 5 to both sides, which is how they got to step 2. Okay, then once they get rid of that, then we're looking at the division and multiplication. Well, we can divide by 2. That's going to give us 5 halves. Then we want to get to the parentheses, but before we can get to the parentheses, we've got to get rid of that square. So this is where you're going to take the square root of both sides, which gives you the square root of 5 and the square root of 2. Again, you can't leave it like that, so you have to rationalize your denominator. They did not show that step, but they're multiplying by the square root of 2. That's going to give you 2 on the bottom with no house. This is inside the house, so you can multiply those. 5 times 2 is 10, square root of 10. And you'll see they have their plus or minus. Then, to finish it up, you have to get rid of the 3. They're subtracting 3, so you're going to add 3. And look how they wrote their answer. Okay, 3 is in front. Then you've got your plus or minus this fraction. Okay, don't freak out. Don't freak out. I'm gonna work with you through these problems. So let's look at A. I'm gonna do this here. We've got 4 open parentheses x plus 5 squared minus 49 equals 0. Okay, so it seems like it's hard, but honestly, you guys, it's the same thing over and over and over again. So first thing I need to do is get rid of that minus 49. I'm going to add 49. Okay, so I've got 4 parentheses plus 5 squared equals 49. Then I'm going to divide by 4. X plus 5 squared equals 49 over 4. I'm not simplifying that fraction, no decimals, just leaving it just like that. Then, to get rid of that square, I have to take the square root. And just so I don't forget, I'm going to go ahead and put that plus or minus right there with that step, because as soon as you take the square root, that's what's going to give you the plus or minus. Okay? So, the square root of 49 is 7. The square root of 4 is 2, so I still have my plus or minus there. And then I'm going to bring down x plus 5 equals. Okay, last step, subtract 5. And you want to write it just like they wrote the example. So I'm going to have minus 5 first, or negative 5 first. Plus or minus is going to be in the middle. 7 halves. That's your answer. So I know you're like, what the heck does that even mean? Well, that's actually two locations where the x is crossing the x-axis. What we have is negative 5 plus, that's, isn't 7 halves 3 1/2? I believe so. 7 divided by 2, yeah, is 3 1/2, 3.5. So you've got negative 5 plus 3 1/2, which gives you, let's see, negative 5 plus 3.5 is negative 1 1/2. And then you've got negative 5 minus 3 1/2. That's going to be negative 8 1/2. So those are the two places that the where the graph is going to cross the x-axis. So it's crossing in both of those locations. So that right here, this ugliness, is what that represents. Okay, so we could take it a step further and do the positive and do the negative and get the actual two locations. Okay? Okay, so on B, I'm going to add 16, 3, open parentheses, x minus 2 squared equals 16, divide by 3 on both sides. That cancels out the 3, so we have x minus 2 squared equals 16 divided by 3. Then I need to take the square root of both sides. That's going to leave me with x minus 2 equals plus or minus the square root of 16 over the square root of 3. Okay, 16 is a perfect square, so that's going to be x minus 2 equals plus or minus 4 over the square root of 3. We cannot leave that radical in the denominator, so I'm going to multiply by itself on the top and bottom. Okay, so bottom is just going to be 3, and the top is 4 on the outside, 3 on the inside, plus or minus x minus 2. Then I'm going to add 2. I wish I could tell y'all that was my child. It's not my child. Alright, and so then we've got 2 plus or minus 4 square root of 3 divided by 3. That is B. Alright, C. Okay, so C, I'm going to, again, press pause. Work this one out by yourself. See if you can do it. Press play to get some help. Okay, plus 8, 5, x plus 1 squared equals 8 divided by 5. X plus 1 squared equals 8 divided by 5. Take the square root of both sides. Plus or minus the square root of 8 over the square root of 5. Now, 8 is not perfect and 5 is not perfect. So I'm just going to keep rolling with rationalizing the denominator. I'm going to multiply both the top and bottom by the square root of 5. That on the bottom gives me 5. And on the top, they're both on the inside. 8 and 5 are both on the inside, so that gives me 40. Okay, that's plus or minus x plus 1. Now, here's the issue with this one. 40 has a perfect square within it. Okay, the factors of 40 are 1, 2, 4, 5, 8, 10. I don't know. I got lost. But we're looking for the perfect square. So I know 4 is 1. 4 times 10, but 10, does it have 1 in it? No, so that's it. Okay, so I could break that up into 4 times 10. Then I can take the square root of 4, which gives me 2, and the square root of 10 stays in the radical with 5 on the bottom. Okay, so I had to simplify that 40 because it had a perfect square in that. Now, if this was a test and you forgot to do that, you would not be wrong. I would not mark your whole problem wrong. You would just like get -1 for not simplifying. But don't stress over that too much. There's your answer. Oh, you can't see it. So -1 plus or minus 2 square root of 10 all over 5. So that is your answer to that. Okay, last but not least, and this is the last problem for the day. So one more, press pause, work it out, come back to it. I'm going to subtract 25. 4x plus 7 squared equals -25. Divide by 4 on both sides. X plus 7 squared equals -25 over 4. I'm going to take the square root of both sides. So that's going to be x plus 7 equals the square root of -25 over the square root of 4. X plus 7 equals the square root of 25 is 5. The square root of -25 is 5i. The square root of 4 is 2. Does anyone know what I forgot? I keep forgetting this. Plus or minus. Do not be like Miss Cole. Remember your plus and minus. Then you're going to subtract 7 on both sides. So your answer is x equals -7 plus or minus 5i over 2. Hopefully you got that by yourself. But here's the positive. If you are still lost, you can take your homework problems and you can start working them. And if you get stuck, come back, watch one of those problems because they are a repeat. You are doing the same steps over and over and over again. The numbers are just different. Find one that it is like. You've got those 4 examples and do those. Don't forget that you have to submit your notes, so make sure you copy everything down just like I am. I am checking that, making sure that you are taking the notes and that they're not sloppy, they're not rushed, and they look like mine. All right, your homework. What you are going to work on, this video is only 27 minutes, so you still have plenty of time in class to work on this. You are going to do number 11. There's 6 problems there for you to work on. So I know you are like, OMG, Ms. Cole, 6 problems. But you have tons of class time to work on those. So if you are in class today, work on those, get those 6 problems done and submitted to me. Do them on a piece of paper. You do not have space to do them in this book. So grab you a piece of blue sleeve paper, show your work, and submit those. So you have 2 pages of notes to submit to me. Make sure you submit both page 137 and 138 and your homework, which you can just take a picture of your piece of paper for number 11. All right, I love you guys and miss you very much and cannot wait to be back with you guys. That's frozen. Anyways, I don't know if it's recording or not. Have a great Oh, okay.